AAFCO, that's the Association of American Feed Control Officials, the people who basically write the rule book for pet food labels. They define natural as a feed or ingredient derived solely from plant, animal, or mined sources, not produced by or subject to a chemically synthetic process.
Sounds reasonable, right? Except that covers almost everything. Meat? Natural. Fat? Natural. Bone meal? Natural. You could grind up the worst quality animal byproducts on the planet, and as long as nobody synthesized them in a lab, slap natural on the bag, done. And here's where it gets kinda gross. The FDA? They don't even have their own legal definition for natural on pet food. They've got loose guidance, suggestions basically. So when a brand puts all natural in big letters across the front of the bag, they're not lying. They're not breaking any rules, because there aren't really rules to break. There's a definition so wide you could drive a truck through it, which, they literally do. Trucks full of this stuff. The word does zero work. It tells you nothing about quality, nothing about sourcing, nothing about whether the chicken in there was a chicken or, well, we'll get to that. It's a marketing word dressed up as a quality word, and the reason it works is because nobody thinks to check. Why would you? It says natural. Sounds good. Bag looks clean. Move on. That's the whole trick. So you flip the bag over. You read the ingredients. First one says chicken. Great, right? Except chicken on a pet food label means something very specific under AAFCO rules. It's the clean combination of flesh and skin, with or without bone. Sounds fine, but that first listed ingredient is weighed before cooking. Before they remove all the water. Chicken is like 70% moisture. So after processing, that chicken that looked like the #1 ingredient, it probably dropped to 4th or 5th on the list, behind the corn, behind the wheat, behind whatever starch they're using as filler. And then there's ingredient splitting. This one's, honestly, it's kind of brilliant in a scummy way. Say a food is mostly rice. Instead of listing rice as the top ingredient, they'll break it into ground rice, rice bran, rice flour, brewer's rice. Each one shows up lower on the list individually, but add them up, rice is the main thing your dog's eating. It's the same ingredient wearing 4 different hats. Oh, and chicken meal, different from chicken. Meal means it's been rendered, cooked down, dried, ground into powder. It's actually more protein-dense than whole chicken because the water's already gone. So weirdly, chicken meal as a second ingredient might be giving your dog more actual protein than chicken as the first. The labels aren't lying, they're just arranged to mislead you. Rendering plants take animal material that can't be sold as food for humans. Expired grocery store meat, restaurant grease, slaughterhouse waste, dead livestock, and they cook it all down at high temperatures until it separates into fat and protein solids. The fat becomes animal fat. The solids get ground into meal, and a lot of that ends up in pet food. Now look, rendering itself isn't automatically bad. It's a recycling process. It keeps millions of tons of animal waste out of landfills every year, and the heat kills most pathogens. Fine, but the problem is what goes in. AAFCO allows terms like meat meal and meat and bone meal and animal fat without requiring the species to be identified. So you genuinely don't know if that protein came from beef, pork, poultry, or, and I wish I were making this up, potentially euthanized animals. The FDA has found pentobarbital, which is a euthanasia drug, in certain rendered animal fats used in pet food. They published a study on it, 2002, I think, maybe 2000. The levels were low. They said it posed no real health risk, and that was sort of that. Case closed. But low levels of euthanasia drugs is not a sentence that should appear anywhere near a bag with a golden retriever on it. And no brand's putting that on the label. They don't have to. because animal fat covers it all. You see "made with real chicken" on a bag of dog food, and you think, okay, cool, there's chicken in there. Real chicken. That's what those words mean, right? Yeah, not exactly. AAFCO, that's the Association of American Feed Control Officials, the people who basically write the rules for pet food labels, they have this thing called the with rule, and it says that if a product says with an ingredient, that ingredient only has to make up 3% of the total weight. 3%. That's it. So, made with real chicken can legally mean 97% of that food is something else. Corn, soy, mystery meal, whatever. Doesn't matter. As long as 3% is chicken, the label's fine. And it gets worse, because there's a whole ladder of these claims, and each rung means something different. Chicken dog food, that's the 95% rule. Actual chicken has to be the main thing. Chicken dinner or chicken entree, that drops to 25%. With chicken, 3%. And then there's chicken flavor, which means the dog food just has to taste like chicken. There doesn't need to be any real chicken in the bag at all. So you've got 4 different label claims that all sound like they mean the same thing. And the gap between the best one and the worst one is, it's basically the difference between a chicken breast and a chicken-scented candle. The brands know this. They're counting on you not knowing it. No byproducts is one of the biggest selling points in premium dog food right now. It's on bags, it's in ads, it's the first thing some brands brag about. And I get why. The word sounds gross. Byproducts, like leftovers nobody wanted. But here's what byproducts actually are, according to AAFCO's own definition. Organs, blood, bone, fatty tissue, intestines, liver, kidneys, lungs, spleen, stuff like that. Not feathers, not hair, not hooves. Those are specifically excluded. And look, I get that spleen isn't appetizing, but dogs aren't picky about that. Organ meat is genuinely nutrient-dense. Liver's packed with iron and vitamin A. Kidneys are loaded with B12. Wolves, which, dogs come from, they eat the organs first, before the muscle meat. That's just how canine biology works. So when a brand slaps no byproducts on the bag, what they're really saying is, we removed some of the most nutritionally valuable parts of the animal, and we'd like you to pay more for that decision. Now, does that mean all byproducts are great? No. The issue isn't byproducts as a category. The issue is sourcing. Meat byproducts with no species named? That's vague on purpose. Chicken byproducts from a named traceable source? That's a different conversation. The industry turned a perfectly fine ingredient into a dirty word because scaring you is more profitable than educating you, and it worked. Okay, this one's genuinely unsettling. There's a term in the rendering industry, 4D, stands for dead, diseased, dying, and disabled. It refers to animals that didn't pass USDA inspection for human consumption, cattle that died before slaughter, livestock too sick to stand, animals with tumors, infections, conditions you don't want to think about while you're scooping kibble into a bowl. And technically, this material can end up in pet food. The FDA's official position is that they don't endorse using 4D meat, but they also don't explicitly ban it in all cases. There's this kind of regulatory gray zone where the agency says it exercises enforcement discretion, which is a very polite way of saying they look the other way sometimes. The rendering process is supposed to kill pathogens. High heat, high pressure, the works. And it probably does most of the time. But killing bacteria doesn't remove drug residues. It doesn't remove pentobarbital, the euthanasia drug, which has actually been detected in commercial pet food. The FDA ran tests. They found it. Small amounts, sure, but it was there. Now, do most major brands use 4D meat? Probably not, at least not knowingly. But when a label says meat meal with no species, no source, no further detail, you genuinely have no way of confirming what went into that batch. None. And neither does the company selling it to you half the time, because they're buying from third-party renderers. That's the part that should bother you.
Okay, so you look at a bag of kibble and the first ingredient is chicken. Great, feels good. You're like, all right, my dog's eating real food. But then you keep reading and there's rice, and then rice flour, and then brewer's rice, and then rice bran. You see what happened there? That's 4 different versions of the same grain, split into separate line items, so none of them individually outweigh the chicken. Add them up, rice is the main ingredient, by a lot. But it doesn't look that way because the label lists ingredients by weight, one at a time, and the brand knows that.
They're counting on you stopping at the first line. This is called ingredient splitting. And it's not illegal. That's the frustrating part. There's no rule that says you have to group your rice together. You just don't. And the consumer reads chicken first and walks away thinking their dog's getting a meat-based diet, which maybe they are, maybe they aren't. You genuinely can't tell from the label alone, and that's the whole point. Corn does the same thing. Corn gluten meal, ground corn, corn bran. 3 entries, 1 ingredient. Peas are everywhere now too. Pea protein, pea fiber, whole peas. It's the same trick with a different vegetable. And the thing is, nobody's gonna stand in a pet store aisle with a calculator. The brands know that too. That's kind of the whole business model. There's a steak on the front of the bag, like a beautiful, glistening, perfect cut of beef. Maybe some carrots next to it. Little sprig of rosemary. Looks like something you'd order at a restaurant. And inside the bag is a brown pellet that smells like a factory floor. I mean, you knew that already, but it's worth saying out loud because the gap between what's on the package and what's in the package is doing real work. And the naming rules, they're wild. If the product says beef dog food, it has to be 95% beef, not counting water. Sounds strict. But if it says beef dinner or beef entree or beef platter, 25%. That one word, dinner, drops the requirement by 70%. And if the label says with beef, 3%. 3. Your dog's with beef recipe is 97% not beef. Then there's beef flavor, which, and I kind of love this, doesn't require any beef at all, just a sufficient amount of flavoring to be detectable. Detectable, that's the legal bar. So you've got 4 tiers of beef, basically, and unless you already know the rules, they all look the same on a shelf, which is, again, the point. The label isn't telling you what's inside, it's telling you what they want you to feel. Most kibble is cooked at somewhere around 200 degrees Celsius, some higher, and at that temperature, you're killing bacteria, sure, but you're also destroying a pretty big chunk of the vitamins, the enzymes, the fatty acids, the stuff that was supposedly the reason you picked that bag in the first place. By the time the extrusion process is done, the kibble is, nutritionally, it's kind of hollow. So what do? They spray it. After cooking, the kibble gets coated with a mix of fats and synthetic vitamins and flavor enhancers, palatins they're called, to make it smell like food again. Because without that coating, most dogs wouldn't touch it. Like, your dog isn't excited about the kibble. Your dog is excited about the spray. And here's where natural gets really fun. The kibble itself might technically meet the AAFCO definition of natural, but the vitamin spray on top, synthetic, manufactured in a lab. And AAFCO actually allows this. They just require a disclaimer, something like natural with added vitamins and minerals, which sounds fine until you realize that disclaimer covers a product where the only reason it meets nutritional standards at all is because of the synthetic add-ons.
So the natural part is the dead, cooked-out base, and the part keeping your dog alive? That's the part that isn't natural. You got to appreciate the honesty almost.
You'd think a word like premium on a bag of dog food means something, like there's a threshold, a standard, some checklist a brand has to hit before they slap that on the packaging. There isn't. AAFCO, the group that sets the definitions for pet food labeling in the US, has no official definition for premium, none for gourmet, none for holistic, none for super premium either, which, yeah, that's a thing now. These words are not regulated. They're not tied to ingredient quality, sourcing, nutritional content, nothing.
A company can fill a bag with the cheapest feed-grade ingredients on the market and call it Holistic Gourmet Premium, and nobody's showing up to stop them because there's nothing to enforce. And I think that's the part that gets me. It's not that brands are lying exactly, it's that they've figured out they don't have to. The rules are built so that certain words just float. They sound like promises, but they function like decoration. Premium feels like it means better than the regular stuff, but it doesn't mean anything. It's vibes. Expensive-looking vibes on a bag that costs $4 more. Now, human grade, that one actually does have a legal meaning. Sort of. AAFC says if you want to call your food human grade, every single ingredient and the final product has to be manufactured and handled according to human food safety standards. Every step, which is a real bar. But premium, gourmet, you could put those on a bag of sawdust and technically be fine. That's the game. The words that sound like they matter are the ones nobody's checking. Corn gluten meal, soybean hulls, brewer's rice, cellulose. You see these on a label and your eyes kind of glaze over. They sound fine, scientific-ish, like they belong there. And brands are counting on that. They're counting on you not knowing that some of these ingredients are essentially leftovers from other manufacturing processes that got redirected into pet food because someone figured out they could bulk up a bag for pennies. Brewer's rice, for example, that's the small, broken fragments of rice left over after milling. It's not brown rice, it's not whole grain rice, it's what fell through the cracks, literally, during processing, and it's one of the most common ingredients in mid-range kibble. Does it provide some carbohydrate energy? Sure. Is it there because it's nutritionally optimal for your dog? Come on. Cellulose is another one. That's plant fiber. Sometimes it's wood pulp. I mean, it is what it is. It adds bulk, it makes the dog feel full, and it contributes almost nothing nutritionally. And it shows up in foods that cost $30, $40 a bag. And look, I'm not saying every filler is poison. Some fiber is fine. Dogs need carbs, I get it. But there's a difference between an ingredient that's there because your dog benefits from it and an ingredient that's there because it's cheap and it makes the margins work. And the label doesn't tell you which is which. That's by design. The ingredient list is technically transparent. Everything's listed, but it's structured so that the stuff doing the least gets noticed the least. Transparency that's designed to bore you isn't really transparency. BHA, BHT, and ethoxyquin. If you've never heard of these, that's fine. Most people haven't. But if you flip over certain bags of dog food, especially the cheaper ones, they're there. Sometimes buried in the fine print, sometimes listed under preservatives, like that's supposed to make it casual.
BHA and BHT are synthetic antioxidants. They stop fats from going rancid, which, okay, fair, you need something to keep kibble shelf stable. But here's where it gets weird. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has listed BHA as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. California requires a warning label on products containing it. The EU restricts its use in human food. And yet, in dog food, totally fine. No warning, no restriction, no conversation. Ethoxyquin's even stranger. It was originally developed as a pesticide. Well, a rubber stabilizer, actually. Then it found its way into animal feed. The FDA asked one manufacturer to voluntarily lower levels in dog food back in 1997. Voluntarily. And that's about as far as enforcement went. Now, are these preservatives gonna kill your dog overnight? No, probably not. The doses are small, but probably not harmful in small amounts over a long time is a pretty low bar for something you're feeding an animal every single day for 12, 15 years. And the thing is, alternatives exist. Tocopherols, that's basically vitamin E, do the same job. Nobody's making them switch. Why would they? Around 2018, the FDA started getting reports. Dogs, healthy dogs, young dogs, breeds that don't normally have heart problems were developing a condition called dilated cardiomyopathy, DCM. Basically, the heart gets bigger and weaker until it can't pump right. And a weird number of these dogs had one thing in common. They were eating grain-free food. Now, I want to be careful here because the research is still ongoing, and nobody's published a clean, definitive, grain-free diets cause heart disease conclusion. But the FDA opened an investigation. They named 16 brands, and the pattern was hard to ignore. See, when brands pulled grains out of their formulas, they had to replace them with something. So they leaned on legumes, lentils, peas, chickpeas, as the main carb source. And there's a theory that high levels of legumes might interfere with how dogs absorb taurine, which is an amino acid their hearts literally need to function. So you've got dogs eating food that was marketed as closer to nature, more ancestral, better, and it might have been quietly starving their hearts of something essential. And the thing that gets me, grain-free took off because of marketing, not science. Dogs aren't people. They don't have the same gluten sensitivities. Most dogs do perfectly fine with grains, rice, oats, barley, whatever. The whole grain-free trend was basically the pet food industry borrowing a human health fad and slapping it on a bag of kibble, and dog owners bought it, because why wouldn't they? It sounded better. Free from always sounds better. That's the trick. You remove something nobody needed to worry about, and suddenly it feels like an upgrade. AAFCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, is the organization that defines what words like natural and organic and human grade are allowed to mean on a bag of dog food. They set the standards. They write the definitions. And I think most people assume that means they also, enforce them. They don't. AAFCO has no regulatory authority. None. They can't pull a product off a shelf. They can't fine a company. They can't inspect a facility. They're basically a standards writing body that publishes a rulebook and then hopes everybody follows it. Enforcement, if it happens at all, falls to individual state departments of agriculture. And if you're wondering how well-funded and aggressive state feed control offices are, yeah, you already know the answer. So what you end up with is this weird system where the definitions exist on paper, but nobody's really checking. A brand can print natural on the front of a bag, and technically there's a definition for that. AAFCO says it means the ingredients come from plant, animal, or mined sources, and weren't produced by a chemically synthetic process. Okay, fine. But who's verifying? Who's auditing the supply chain? Who's cross-referencing the ingredient list against the claim? Pretty much nobody. Not consistently anyway. And that's the gap the industry lives in. The rules look real. The definitions sound specific. But the space between what's written and what's enforced is, it's enormous. It's where most of the marketing magic happens. You follow the letter of a definition that nobody's checking, and you get to put whatever you want on the bag. You ever noticed how many dog food brands talk like they're small? Family-owned, craft batch, founded by a dog mom and her kitchen energy. The packaging's got earth tones, maybe a hand-drawn logo, some copy about sourcing local ingredients. Feels like you're buying from somebody who cares, right? Look up who owns them, because there's a decent chance it's Mars, Nestle, or Colgate-Palmolive. Those three companies, through subsidiaries and acquisitions, control a massive chunk of the pet food market. Mars owns Royal Canin, Nutro, Iams, Eukanuba, Pedigree, and a bunch more. Nestle owns Purina, which covers ProPlan, Fancy Feast, Beneful, Friskies. The list keeps going. Colgate-Palmolive owns Hill's Science Diet. And a lot of the independent brands that popped up over the last decade, they got bought. Quietly. Sometimes the name stays, the packaging stays, the Our Story page stays, but the checks go somewhere else now. And I'm not even saying a big corporation can't make decent dog food. That's a separate argument. What I'm saying is the branding is doing a very specific job. It's making you feel like you're opting out of the industrial pet food machine when you're actually just buying a different shelf from the same machine. The premium price isn't paying for better ingredients. It's paying for better marketing aimed at people who distrust big brands, which is sort of genius if you think about it. They figured out that the backlash against corporate pet food was a market, so they built brands that look like the alternative, and then they bought the ones they didn't build. You ever notice how certain brands just show up in every vet's office? Like you walk in for a routine checkup and there's a display rack right next to the scale. Same 3 or 4 brands every time. And your vet, who you trust, obviously, says, yeah, that's the good stuff. Okay, but here's what nobody tells you. Those brands, they fund the nutrition courses at vet schools. Literally fund them. Royal Canin, Hill's, Purina, they sponsor the curriculum, provide the textbooks, sometimes even send reps to lecture. So by the time your vet graduates, the only brands they've been taught about in any real depth are the ones paying for the education, which is kind of a wild conflict of interest when you think about it for more than 5 seconds. And I'm not saying your vet is bought. I want to be real clear about that. Most vets genuinely believe the recommendations they're making. That's what makes it work so well. You don't need to buy someone off if you shaped what they learned before they ever opened a practice. Then there's the kickback thing. Some clinics get margins on every bag sold through their office. Not all of them, but some, and you'd never know because nobody's required to disclose it. So when a bag says vet recommended by vets who were educated by that company, selling the food in their own clinic with a financial incentive to move product. That's what vet recommended means. It's not a lie, it's just not the whole sentence. In 2007, melamine-contaminated wheat gluten killed, depending on who you ask, somewhere between a few dozen and potentially thousands of dogs and cats across the US. That range alone should bother you. We don't actually know how many pets died because there's no mandatory centralized reporting system. Still isn't one, by the way, almost 20 years later. But okay, that was the big one, the one people remember. What about the quiet ones? Brands issue recalls all the time. Salmonella contamination, elevated vitamin D levels, which can cause kidney failure, by the way, metal fragments in the food. And most of the time, you don't hear about it unless you're actively checking the FDA's recall page, which no one does. I didn't until I started looking into this stuff. The brands post a notice on their website, maybe put out a press release at 4 p.m. on a Friday, and that's it. Done. There's no system that pings you, no requirement that the store where you bought it contacts you. You could be feeding your dog recalled food right now and have absolutely no idea. And I'm not being dramatic. That's just how the system works. Or doesn't work, I guess. The thing that gets me is the language. It's always out of an abundance of caution, every single time. A dog dies from elevated toxin levels, and the brand frames it like they're just being extra careful, like they caught it early. Sometimes they didn't catch it at all. A customer did. Legally, and this is where it gets sort of absurd, there is no federally regulated definition of human grade for pet food. None. AAFCO doesn't define it. The FDA doesn't enforce it. A brand can slap human grade on a bag, and unless every single ingredient was produced, handled, and stored in a facility that meets USDA standards for human food, it means nothing. And almost none of them meet that standard. Almost none of them even try. There's a distinction here that matters. Human grade would mean the food is actually edible by human standards, processed in a human food facility, inspected under human food rules. Feed grade means it meets the standards for animal feed, which are lower, significantly lower. We're talking different facilities, different handling requirements, different tolerance levels for things like bacteria counts and contaminants. So when a brand says made with human-grade ingredients, catch that wording. Made with, not is. The chicken might have started in a human-grade supply chain, but the second it enters a feed-grade facility for processing, it's not human-grade anymore. That's how the regulation actually works. The final product has to qualify, not just one ingredient before it got mixed in. And look, some brands do meet the full standard. A handful. They'll usually tell you loudly and specifically because it's expensive to maintain and they want credit for it. Fair enough. But the rest? They're borrowing the phrase because it sounds clean and premium and safe, and because no one's going to stop them. That's the game. Sound like something, mean nothing. AAFCO has two ways a dog food can claim it's complete and balanced. One is a nutrient profile, basically a checklist. Does the food hit minimum levels for protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, all of it? Cool, you pass. The other way is a feeding trial. And when I first heard that, I thought, okay, that sounds legit. They're actually feeding it to dogs and watching what happens. That's science, right? Sort of.
Here's what an AAFCF feeding trial actually requires. 8 dogs. 6 of them have to finish the trial. It lasts 26 weeks, and the dogs just have to not lose more than 15% of their body weight. That's the bar. That's what proven nutrition means on the bag. No blood work required beyond a few basics. No long-term health tracking. No monitoring of coat, digestion, energy, joints. None of it. Just, did the dog survive 6 months without wasting away too badly? Great. Slap animal feeding tests on the label.
And look, I'm not saying feeding trials are worthless. They're better than just running a spreadsheet on nutrient minimums. But the gap between what people think a feeding trial means and what it actually means is enormous. You hear clinically tested, and you picture a lab with veterinary nutritionists monitoring everything. The reality is closer to a kennel with 8 dogs eating the same kibble for half a year while someone checks a scale. 6 months, 8 dogs, 15% weight loss allowed? That's the gold standard. Kind of makes you wonder what the bronze looks like. A 20-pound bag for $12 feels like a win until you start doing the math on what's actually in it. And I don't mean that in a hand-wavy, you get what you pay for kind of way. I mean specifically, cheap kibble has to hit those AAFCO nutrient minimums somehow, and the cheapest way to do it is with ingredients your dog can technically digest but doesn't absorb well. Corn gluten meal, meat and bone meal, animal digest, soybean hulls, stuff that checks the protein box on paper but has a biological value that's substantially lower than actual muscle meat. Your dog eats more to get less, which means more output, worse coat, and a digestive system that's just working harder than it should be for fewer results. And here's where it gets expensive. Skin issues, ear infections, chronic diarrhea, allergies that aren't really allergies. Vets see this stuff constantly. Not every case traces back to diet, obviously, but a lot of them do. And you're spending $80, $100, $150 per vet visit trying to fix a symptom that started with a $12 bag of food. I'm not saying you need to buy the most expensive brand on the shelf. Some of those are just better marketing on the same middling ingredients. But there's a floor, products for an ear infection that won't clear up. The cheap bag isn't cheap, it's deferred. Made with real chicken. You see it on the bag, and your brain does exactly what it's supposed to do. It pictures chunks of chicken, actual chicken. Maybe a breast, maybe some thighs, something you'd recognize. That's the whole point of the phrase. But AAFCO has naming rules, and they're weirdly specific. If the label says chicken dog food, just the protein in the product, the food has to be at least 95% chicken by weight, not counting water used for processing. 95. That's a real standard. Drop down to chicken dinner or chicken entree, anything with a qualifier word, and now you only need 25%, which, okay, that's a big drop, but at least it's something. Now, made with chicken. That phrase, the one plastered across half the bags at PetSmart, 3%. The minimum is 3% chicken, 3. You could fill the rest with corn and rendered mystery meal and still legally print made with real chicken on the front of the bag. And they do. And it gets worse. Chicken flavored means there doesn't have to be any chicken in there at all. Just enough of something chicken derived that a dog can taste it. Could be chicken fat, could be digest, which, by the way, is a chemically hydrolyzed slurry of animal tissue. Sounds delicious. So when a brand puts made with real meat in big letters on the front, they're betting you won't flip the bag over. They're usually right. Flip the bag over. Seriously, just flip it over. The front is advertising. The back is where they legally have to stop lying to you. Mostly. First thing you're looking for is the ingredient list. It goes by weight, heaviest first. So if chicken's at the top, that sounds great, right? Except whole chicken is like 70% water. Cook it down, and that chicken drops way further down the list than where they put it. That's not an accident. They know how this works. And watch for ingredient splitting. This one's honestly kind of genius in a sleazy way. Say the food's got a bunch of different rice types: brewer's rice, rice flour, brown rice. Each one gets listed separately, so they all look like small ingredients. Add them up, rice might be the main thing in the bag, but it'll never look that way on the label. That's the trick. Next, the guaranteed analysis. Crude protein, crude fat, crude fiber, moisture. These are minimums and maximums, not exact numbers. Crude protein, min 26%. Doesn't mean your dog's getting 26% protein. It means the food passed a chemical test that doesn't even distinguish between good protein and leather. I'm not making that up. The test literally can't tell the difference. And then there's the AAFC statement, usually buried in tiny print near the barcode. You want it to say the food was tested through feeding trials, not just that it meets the nutrient profiles. One means dogs actually ate it and did fine. The other means it looks right on a spreadsheet. Big difference. I'm not going to name brands. That's not what this is. Because a brand that's solid today gets bought out tomorrow and quietly swaps its formula. And now my recommendation aged like milk. So instead, rules. Things that hold up no matter which bag you're staring at in the aisle. Named protein first. Not meat meal. Not animal byproduct. Chicken, beef, salmon, an actual species. If the label won't tell you what animal it came from, that's your answer right there. Short ingredient lists aren't automatically better, but they're easier to verify. If the back of the bag reads like a chemistry textbook, that's a lot of trust you're handing over to a company that already put natural on the front in 60-point font. Run from anything that leads with marketing language and buries the AAFCO statement. Run from brands that use the word holistic, which, reminder, means literally nothing in this context. No regulation, no definition, no standard. It's a vibe. You're paying for a vibe. And look, I get it. You're standing in a pet store, your dog's in the car, you've got 10 minutes. You're not going to cross-reference the AAFCO guidelines on your phone. So here's the bare minimum. Named protein source, feeding trial statement, and no ingredient splitting that makes grain look like a cameo when it's actually the lead. That's it. 3 things. Takes about 15 seconds once you know where to look. The brands made it confusing on purpose, but once you see the pattern, you kinda can't unsee it.